Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Viewers, last 24 hours have been quite busy. You can see that there are three developments at least that are, four developments that are taking place or they have taken place in the past 24 hours. One was, of course, Pakistan finally managed to beat India in a World Cup match. So naturally the entire country is really jubilant at this moment, and that is perhaps why people didn't focus on other news developments that were going on. One being Balochistan, the other being Punjab, where TLP was protesting, and finally the Prime Minister of Pakistan is visiting Saudi Arabia, and that is also a very high profile visit. But regarding Balochistan, while Pakistan was winning the match at that time, we also heard the news that Jam Kamal, the Chief Minister of Balochistan, has resigned, and his resignation has been accepted by the governor. Remember, his own party, its dissident elements actually came up with the vote of no confidence, and then after certain members disappeared first from the dissident group, they reappeared, and after that it was certain that he was going to lose the vote of confidence. But before that, perhaps he decided to resign, or there seems to be some intervention, some mediation, and now Abdul Qudus Bazinjo, who is the speaker, who was the speaker of provincial assembly, is slated, at least it is being hinted, that he might be the next chief minister. He has been chief minister in the past as well, but then things changed because a new election took place, and then he became the speaker. He is quite influential, but people believe, many of the people in the know, that if he is going to be the chief minister, his nature might be of his rule might be of transitory nature. We are going to talk about this, and then in the second half of the program we are going to talk about Pakistan's economics once again, because these matters are important and the negotiations with IMF are still going on. But first, Balochistan, and before I introduce the guest I have with me on Skype, let us watch a package that our team has prepared for you.
Balochistan, Jam Kamal Khan Eilani has decided to step down from his position. The governor of Balochistan, Syed Zahoor Ahmad Agha, has accepted his resignation. Following Jam Kamal's resignation, the provincial cabinet of Balochistan has been dissolved, and now a session of the provincial assembly cannot take place until the appointment of a new chief minister. The Balochistan Assembly Speaker Mir Abdul Qudus Bizinjo has also stepped down from his office and submitted his resignation to the assembly secretariat. Speaking to media outside the Balochistan Assembly, MPA Saleh Sardar Bhutani of the Balochistan Awami Party informed that a few names were under consideration for nomination to the Chief Minister's post. He stressed that consultation on the matter was important with allied parties and not just a single political party. Saleh Sardar Bhutani added that his party would strive to make the change visible, for which all endeavours were being made. It remains to be seen who will be the next Chief Minister of Balochistan and what impact the changing situation in Balochistan will have on the national politics.
In order to help us understand what is going on in Balochistan, we are joined by senior journalist Syed on via Skype. He is in Quetta. Syed, thank you very much for being part of the program. So last time you and I discussed what was going on, there was this consensus that there are too many balls in the air and we don't know what exactly is going to happen. But finally, we have seen that the chief minister has resigned, the speaker has resigned, the cabinet stands dissolved. Can you tell us what do you think is going to come next, and will the next government formation be as easy as one is thinking at this moment?
Thank you, Farrukh. I don't think it will be this much easy because when we are talking an hour before PTI parliamentary, Balochistan parliamentary chapter group set for a meeting, and they have decided they will pitch their parliamentary leader Sardar Yar Mohammad Rind's name as a chief minister's candidate, and they make two members committee, Mir Namat Zahri and Umar Jamali, who will negotiate with the coalition partners. And they also pitch a candidate for the post of speaker Sardar Babar Musa Khail, who is right now a deputy speaker in Balochistan Provincial Assembly. So it's very tricky and interesting situation because Jam Kamal stepped down and opted the option of resignation because there was a opinion, there was a saying if Jam Kamal not resign, if -1 is not done, then PDM will get the benefit.
All
So
right.
taking out PDM from this game, they have convinced Jam Kamal on the resignation. But now PTI Balochistan chapter came up with a new name and they have 7 votes. If we see the last collation, it was on 41. For the chief
Right.
minister, 33 numbers are required. If PTI go with their 7 members and Awami National Party with 4, which is not very close right now with the BAP dissident group. So it become 11 numbers. So it will be very tricky for
Okay.
the selection of new chief minister's candidate for BAP. Although within BAP dissident group there are 2 candidates, Sardar
Right.
Saleh Bhutani and Quddus Bizinjo are top contenders from BAP. But now when PTI comes up with the new name, now situation is not that much easy. That much was planned earlier.
Right. We have seen this dance before. If you remember, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, this was happening during the last days of PMLN as well, when suddenly we saw a new party emerging by the name of Balochistan Awami Party. Quddus Bizinjo emerged as the chief minister back then as well. And once again, the circles that are in the know are continuously pushing his name. Can you tell us what strengths does he possess, and how does it actually translate when it comes to PTI versus Balochistan Awami Party? Because both parties, as you have pointed out, want their own chief minister.
Farrukh, there is a interesting thing. PTI central leadership, federal leadership, and PTI Balochistan leadership have lot of differences. We have
Yeah.
seen and we have observed in past in the Senate elections and many times. Even this time, when Jam Kamal's resignation, before resignation of Jam Kamal, when Parvez Khattak visited Quetta and he tried to convince his parliamentary party to support Quddus Bizinjo rather than Jam Kamal, in that meeting, Omar Jamali, ex-Prime Minister Zafla Jamali's son, who is the MPA from PTI, he argued with Parvez Khattak and asked him what you and party did for us in last 3.5 years. You even not asked us once. So how you expect we accept your request or directions? We will wait for our parliamentary leader. He is out of country. When he will come back, we will sit and we will decide. And today they did it, and they come up with the 2 names: one for a speaker, one for chief minister. If they not surrender, if they not support BAP coalition, or they contest for the chief minister's candidate, then it will be very difficult for dissident BAP members to make a government without support of PDM.
Right. I understand that since you actually brought up the matter of PTI Central and PTI Provincial, let me also ask you about Balochistan Awami Party, Central and Provincial. We know that the chapter here is weaker in Islamabad, but Chairman Senate has been a patron. Do you think that that factor is also going to play into what is going on? And frankly, before talking to you, the impression here at least was that it is going to be slam dunk, and that Quddus Bizinjo might actually get the slot once again. But as you are pointing out, it seems that chaos might be winning rather than the political order. In that situation, do you think that it can be contained only to Balochistan, or it can spread elsewhere as well?
One thing, when we see the history, we have many times when a political change in country comes up, it starts from Balochistan. And the one interesting thing which I share with you, when Sadiq Sanjarani and Parvez Khattak came to meet Jam Kamal in Quetta 2 days earlier, that time Jam Kamal given clear message to Sadiq Sanjarani, don't worry about my chair, my CM-ship, be careful about yours. After this vote of no confidence, we will play our democratic role in Senate. I think this is the loud, clear message from Jam Kamal because BAP have 8 senators in the Senate right now, and 4 of them are right now with Jam Kamal. How much long they will continue with Jam Kamal, it's still not decided. But also, Jam Kamal have few member national assemblies in National Assembly, so he have the option to play some game, but
Yeah.
it's not clear what he will do after this resignation, because he
Right.
is silent. After few days, may he come up with something?
Right. Regarding PDM forces or political parties which are in opposition, People's Party, PMLN, JUIF, other PKMAP, other parties, one thing astounding is that we didn't see them too much in action until the very last moment. Day before yesterday, we saw that their leaders were moving around and meeting various dissidents. But why is it that PDM or these parties, including PDM plus, let us call it, including People's Party, they seem to be so slow in the uptake?
Because I think they were waiting for the first wicket down. Until first wicket not down, breakthrough is not done. So breakthrough is not done. If you see yesterday's cricket match, Shaheen Afridi given a breakthrough Pakistan, and then
Yeah.
we will be able to make change the history. So in this current setup, in last 3.5 years, PDM and opposition tried many times to control this situation, and even they once tried a vote of no confidence against Sadiq Sanjarani. So it went not they not get the results which they were thinking. So they were planning at least let the dissident members to topple Jam Kamal's government. If once it's down, then it will give them a space to make something in federal or Punjab government.
Right. Have they come up with any name from the opposition side for the chief minister's position?
I think opposition just for the completion of the process float their candidate, but they are not interested to make government, and they know they are not able to make the government. But
Right.
after right now, after the nomination of Sardar Yar Mohammad Ren from PTI Balochistan chapter, let's see how things will go on.
Right. Very quickly, do you think that we will see some final shapes, in the process in within coming days? And can you give us any timeline?
Timeline is not possible to given because speaker today signed his resignation, but still that resignation is not accepted by the
Okay.
governor. Secretary Assembly will send it to governor. Governor will accept it, and then governor will give the directions to the assembly for the new selection of new speaker election. After
Right.
that, chief minister's game will start.
Right, Shahiduddin Saab, thank you very much for your valuable time. Thank you very much for being part of the program. Because this assessment actually brings us to the end of this segment. We are going to take a break. When we come back, we are going to talk about IMF and Pakistan's economics, which are very important and one has to look at it. Let us take a break first. Welcome back. Before going to the break, I told you that we are going to talk about IMF talks and also Pakistan's economy, where it stands, and how much work it still needs. We know about inflation, it has been there for quite some time. We saw that international pundits are actually even talking about a global hyperinflation. We don't know whether it is going to happen or not, but that is the way everyone is speculating or talking about it. Our finance advisor to the Prime Minister has left the talks, but the talks continue. When you talk about overall picture of the economy today, Pakistan's stock exchange PSX was in fact not very bullish. It was rather bearish. And regarding rupee versus dollar, it continues to lose its weight. We have to talk about what exactly is going on, what are the sticking points in the IMF talks. Suddenly, we kept on hearing about many other things, but suddenly now we hear about Treasury's single account and how there needs to be further action on that issue. So today, in order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Dr. Waqar Ahmed, who is Joint Executive Director, SDPI's Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Not only that, he is an economist and author of renown, and he is one of my favorite researchers. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being part of the program. Dr. Salman Shah is going to join us. I don't know whether he has joined already, but he's not only former federal finance minister, but he is also advisor to the Chief Minister of Punjab. But he hasn't joined yet. When he does, I'm going to thank him as well. Dr. Waqar, let me start with you. We kept on hearing that there is progress being made in the talks with the IMF. And suddenly we know that it is going to continue for at least one more week. And we are hearing about TSA account as well. Government is being asked to shift all its ministries' accounts and monies from may be federal or provincial, from the private banks to the federal single consolidated account. Do tell us about the bottlenecks and TSA as well, sir.
Thank you. That's a very important point which you have made, and maybe I'll just submit three main points. One is that we are encouraged to see that Pakistan is not moving away from the fund program, and it is sticking to a promise of fiscal discipline, and the fact that unlike the previous 2 or 3 times that we had seen, that as soon as the foreign exchange reserves were in a comfortable position, the fiscal managers used to walk out of the program. But this time around, they of course are taking their time. The technical details are difficult, but of course they're not moving away from the program. They're sticking to a plan which can bring fiscal discipline. The second point here is that these are really very technical and very complex negotiations. Reason being because the economies, including Pakistan, is just coming out of the impact, the incidence of COVID. And COVID has left us with very large amounts of deficit and debt. And of course, this debt, including the losses of several state-owned enterprises, which IMF is concerned about, is parked in various different accounts of commercial banks. And this is what should be a concern, not just for IMF, but also us as a taxpayer as well, that at least one should know the cash balance of the government and government's entities. But if your accounts are parked in several dozen bank accounts, it really becomes very difficult to estimate the deficit or the loss or financial position of a company very quickly. This is probably why IMF is really pressing that the bank accounts of state-owned enterprises should now be consolidated.
Right. Dr. Saab, on one side, I'm looking at the staggering amount that is involved, 2,900 billion rupees. But on the other side, I'm also looking at the fact that all the departments, provincial, federal, and including our, defense sector, everything is being asked to actually go through this account. That gives finance ministry a lot of leeway. But all the departments that would like to have some autonomy independent of finance ministry will have difficulty. Do you think that it is even doable right now?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And this is what I think the finance ministry is suggesting. They do require some more time to understand and present a revised proposal of how this can be done. But the problem here is very basic, Farrukh Saab, and the problem here is that if you are the finance secretary and you come to office in the morning and you don't know the bank balance of a country, then of course I think your fiscal discipline is in danger. just like at an individual level, at a company level, for example, a CEO, when he or she comes to the office, they need to very clearly know what is my bank balance, what are my assets in hand. And currently, I think the point which IMF is making is that it is very difficult for the government to really know at one point in time where are my assets parked.
Right. But before I go to Dr. Salman Shah, who has just joined us, thank you very much, Dr. Saab. But Dr. Bakar, regarding centralizing all the finances and bringing them under one header, doesn't it actually go against the spirit of 18th Amendment, and provinces will be not that much chuffed about this? Is it not true?
Yes, so Farrukh, provinces can have their own account, but the balances have to be maintained with the central bank. That is what I think IMF would like to see.
Right. Let me now go to Dr. Salman Shah. Dr. Saab, thank you very much for your time. We are talking about progress with the IMF in the IMF talks. Do you think that there is some room for hope right now?
Absolutely. I think both the IMF and Pakistan are keen to get to an arrangement. And since the dialogue has been going on and we are still talking, so there is, I think there is scope for hope. And actually, Pakistan needs the IMF program, plus Pakistan needs to do a lot of reforms. And if we have the kind of framework of the IMF in place, we will be able to do these reforms. And most of these reforms are kind of important, whether we talk about the energy sector, whether we talk about even the single national accounting mechanism. The public financial management system needs to be brought into the 21st century. And we need to make sure that our assets are properly utilized. We do privatization. We kind of fix the SOEs and ultimately get rid of them as soon as possible. So I think the main thing is that we need to build up our reserves. We have very thin reserves, and if we start to lose them, like we lost 1.6 billion last week, that cannot be contemplated. So we have to build up the reserves, and we have to manage our economy, particularly the public financial management system and the public sector enterprises. So these are critical areas.
Dr. Shah, here's the thing. I understand, and these are very important steps. Pakistan should be doing it regardless of whether Pakistan wants to work with IMF or not, because it is in our interest. But usually you advise a political government. At this moment, there is a political government at the center and all 4 provinces. The question right now is that usually political governments actually focus on these reforms during the honeymoon period in the first 2 years. Now 3 years have passed, and we are 21 months away from the next elections, and at that moment usually it is the time for handouts and dole-outs. Do you think that politics and economic reform can work together right now?
Of course, I think there is no other option. Basically, we have lost almost a year and a half to COVID. Because of COVID, a lot of the IMF program had been suspended. But having said that, I think we still have at least 2 years to go, and during this time period, we can make tremendous progress. If you look at the Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia, the initial news is that Pakistan is on the economic front, other than the environmental front. Pakistan has had very useful discussions on the economic front, which would help to bolster the reserves. And similarly, if we carry out other areas where you, number one, try to increase the flow of dollars into Pakistan, number two, stop the rotting of lots of institutions in Pakistan,
Right.
then try to rejuvenate the export sector, which is, I think, showing signs of great progress,
Right. It is
and
picking up.
capacity constraints are being in the process being removed. We have suffered a very big energy shock,
Yeah.
and the main thing is that we have to overcome it. And basically, we need to ensure that we can preserve our reserves and at the same time go through this short period when you are hit by very high imported inflation. But if we get these agreements in place, I think by the time we go into elections, we would be in a very strong position
Yeah.
because
Until
this inflation is transitory
until
inflation,
right.
and if you can manage it through all the different activities I have mentioned,
Right.
I do think that we have time to turn around the economy right at the time when we go into elections in 2023.
Right, that is quite interesting. Let me go back to Dr. Bakar. Dr. Bakar, at this moment, it seems that inflation is talk of the town. Of course, right now it has been eclipsed by cricket victory against India, but tomorrow, day after tomorrow, people are going to return to talking about it. The question right now is, and I asked Dr. Shah during the previous program as well, but let me ask you, what is driving inflation at this moment? Because it seems to be quite a troubling situation for a common man on the street.
Thank you, Farrukh Saab. And I think as Dr. Salman Shah Saab used the word imported inflation, unfortunately, there are things that the government can do, but there are a lot of things that the government cannot do about this, given that inflation currently is a global phenomena. And as the economies are opening up, there are supply chain disruptions, there are temporary shortages, and what, for example, the IMF outlook has recently predicted that this global inflation could remain until April next year, after which it could start to taper off. And this is really bad news for, let's say, the middle or the low income group. But of course, there are certain things which the government can do, for example, administrative measures, for example, increasing the purchasing power of the poorest of the poor, which is what I'm told that the government is looking into, particularly to ease at least the pressures which are coming from the side of international oil prices.
Right. But we are not merely talking about inflation in one sector or segment. We are looking at 2-3 issues which are there, right? Food inflation, although WHO and FAO, other organizations have been pointing out that food inflation is a humongous concern all over the world as well. But that seems to be in an agricultural country, it seems to be creating a lot of problem for the common man. Everything is going up. The government might be actually trying to step in and regulate some certain prices for the most vulnerable segments. But the question right now is, can it be done, and is it only about energy? And regarding energy, when IMF keeps on asking you to cut subsidies, how do you actually create targeted subsidies for these segments?
No, agreed.
Dr. Bakar.
I think in case of food, you're right. So, for example, one was the first issue was, of course, local food supply chain, which came under stress immediately, if you recall, last year during COVID times, but then the locust attack as well. But generally as well, there has been a supply side stress on agriculture. But then you also saw that in the next period, when we went into a third lockdown, it was the farmers' cash flow which was under stress, due to which it was unable to buy inputs, which was much needed for the next season. Now, the government, of course, moved quickly and also placed import orders, but import globally for food items, including staples, had become very expensive by then, some part of which had to be passed on to the consumers as well. Now, having said this, of course, the government does realize, and they have already admitted, that there are issues in which, for example, local level administration could have done some monitoring, some price monitoring, which delivered. Of course, there were places where local administration did deliver good monitoring of prices and enforcement was in check. But in most other places, for example, including Punjab, which is the food basket, prices at many places could not be monitored the way they were supposed to be. And due to which you're now seeing that the government has now put in place a real-time food security dashboard to improve their monitoring and enforcement of administrative prices.
Right, and that is actually, that sounds like a good step, but is it going to have that kind of impact? Let me ask Dr. Salman Shah Sahab. Dr. Sahab, regarding food inflation and how you plan to actually regulate it, is there any strategic reserve of these crops that might be used if the prices really keep on going high? And all these dashboards and management tools, do they actually translate on ground into some kind of reality as well, sir?
Well, it's a very difficult question because, number one, I think the government will take the hit, political hit. There's no doubt about that. When there is a lot of inflation and food inflation, people suffer. And for us to say, no, they are not suffering or anything, that's besides the point. The real issue is that in an agricultural country like ours, where we should have had some outstanding agriculture output, we have the lowest yields in the world. Our agriculture is not profitable. The cost of doing business for agriculture is very high, and we can see a lot of rural poverty. And one of the issues is that the farmers have never really got the price which will support a proper life for them. So we have been suppressing the prices so that our urban consumers can benefit. But now we are opening up, we are giving them better prices. And we can see that with better inputs, the Kisan card, facilitating them, things are getting better. Administrative actions are not normally successful. What we have to do is to create access for the farmers to the customers, the final customer. And I think we need to do a lot more in terms of creating agriculture markets, farmers' agriculture markets around the larger urban areas. In Lahore, in Faisalabad, in all these big urban centers, there should be dozens and dozens of these markets so that there is no stranglehold on the markets and the intermediaries make excessive profits. If the intermediaries make excessive profits, the solution is more competition over there. So the greater number of markets, the greater digitalization of these markets, information flow, and the ability to farmer to organize himself and provide his output directly to the consumer in the urban areas are the things which we need to do going forward. Plus, we need to do a lot of research in the knowledge economy.
Right, and that is great, sir. Dr. Sahab, you said something that I will request you to actually qualify. You said when you were talking about farmers that we are giving them better prices. Can you explain that? How are you giving them better prices at this moment, sir?
I mean, the procurement price for sugarcane, for wheat has been enhanced. If we look at cotton, the cotton output is up quite significantly. And those are the areas where now, if you look at the cotton price internationally, it is at an all-time high. And the farmer, when they bring their crop into the market, are going to get very good prices. So if for 3 or 4 crops, the farmer is now getting close to international price, I think that's a big factor.
Right.
So
I thought for a
things.
second that you are probably, right now you are saying that it is more market driven, But for a second, I thought that you were talking about subsidizing again. Let me go to Dr. Waqar Ahmed very quickly once again. Dr. Saab, remember last time we were discussing the importance to curtail circular debt. Do you think that thanks to the negotiations that are going on and the decision by the government to pass on the shocks of international market, the circular debt can go down, or it can actually be managed in coming days?
Yes, Farrukh, I think the first thing to manage the circular debt, we've already done it. Of course, it required passing on some burden of the higher prices to the end consumer, and we have gone ahead and increased the price. Hopefully, that should have some positive impact on sort of flows, financial flows to our companies in the energy sector. But I think the other one or two things which have to be done to cut the circular debt involve, for example, rationalization or management of technical losses. That is something which can only be done in the medium term with increased levels of efficiency in our GenCos and DISCOs.
Right.
And then
do we have a percentage figure
term,
here, sir? Do we have a percentage figure here? How much do we lose when you talk about technical losses?
Well, currently, I think the losses range somewhere between 15 to 22%, depending upon the season that one talks about. And I think with the current reforms which have been promised by the power division, they're planning to over time bring it down to somewhere around 11%, which is decent, which brings us at par with the peers, if we can do that. The only caveat here is that we need to move really fast. We have already had circular debt, and we haven't yet implemented fully any of them. So we really need to stick with the plan and stick with it until the time there are visible gains.
Right. And regarding LNG procurement, there were problems in the recent days. Do you think that that can be taken care of, or it has been taken care of already?
Yes, I think to a large extent it has been taken care of. I think the main issue with regards to the pricing still remained, and I'm sure the government will face some criticism in the coming days as well. But frankly, Farrukh Saab, this is a taker's market at this point, and given that there is a very large demand which is just opening up globally as economies come out of COVID, there's very limited that a small buyer in a high demand market could do.
Right. Let me go back to Dr. Salman Shah again. So you want to comment on the circular debt, and why is it that it continues day after day, months after months, years after years? And do you think that the federal government has a plan to curtail it?
Look, Farrukh, I think the energy sector is really our Achilles heel. This sector has given Pakistan the most expensive power in the world almost. And I was looking at some number where the average tariff is around 24, 25 rupees per unit. And that is clearly very, very high. It is beyond the capacity of ordinary people to pay. And it is also so high that you have to subsidize the industry if they want to export using this power. So we have got somewhat of a power sector which is a very big burden on this country. The solution, obviously what Dr. Waqar has said, we can bring down the technical and the losses in distribution from 20% to about 10% or 11%. That will make a difference. But receivables are a very big problem, particularly when we look at FATA or Balochistan, where a lot of billing is done, but you can't collect the bills. And the prime reason is that these areas have a lot of poverty, and they just can't afford to pay all of this. Ultimately, I think there is a ray of hope, and that is solar power. if we can induct solar power very quickly, particularly in those areas like Balochistan, FATA, agriculture sector, and households also, where every roof generates its own power. And I was just seeing that Saudi Arabia about 2 days ago accepted a bid for solar power at 1.48 cents per unit. Now, if this is the cost of solar power, this is even, it's like 10% of the energy price which we are currently paying to the IPPs. So what it means is, even if we honor the capacity payments to the IPP sector, still solar power, if we can inject it, it will be much cheaper. So I
Right,
think
and
that
that is,
we have to
that's a great idea, sir.
the fuel
Dr.
mix,
Sab.
we have to balance the fuel mix.
Yeah.
We need to put in about 10 to 12,000 megawatts of solar power, which can be done over the next 1 year to 2 years, because the period to set up a solar plant is very short. And then I think we should be able to bring the power prices down, and at the same time it make it more affordable. So
Right.
the current thing is that we don't let the circular debt get out of hand and try to stop it, but ultimately we have to bring down the prices of power. And
Right,
that, I
and
think,
that can
will
be
put
done by ending the monopoly of IPPs and these organizations by introducing solar energy. I'm told, sir, that we have run out of time. Dr. Salman Shah Sahab, always great having you in the show. Dr. Waqar Ahmed, thank you very much, sir. It is also great having you in the show. Viewers, you have listened to our participants, of course. This government has done a lot when you listen to the experts, when you listen to people who are in the know. But the problem is that how much more still needs to be done. And at this moment, when we are talking about bringing reform in the energy sector by inducing some solar energy technology there, the question then is, do we have that kind of leeway when it comes to finance, when it comes to money, and of course technology as well? These are big questions. Remember that within 7-8 months, the climate totally changes in any democratic country, and then everybody is gearing for the next election, and at that moment it is thought that it will be dole outs, handouts, and development projects. That doesn't seem to be happening right now. Whether it is going to create more friction in the political system or not, we will see in coming days. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.